So we need to fast forward the conversation on a little bit then, and I suppose the next question that kind of dawns to me from what you put in your thread, and it wasn't something we really alluded to, is you did say that you thought that nothing that Liverpool are doing or may still do in this transfer window is going to impact FSG's sustainability model. So that immediately pulls me forward to summer. I go to summer 2027 and wonder what the impact of this summer may be on next and their ability to do any business next summer. Are we almost going to, is it a bit like Glastonbury where we've kind of gone for the big headliners this year and now we need a fallow year to let the land recover?
Well, that's the bad news. But that's not to say that the club will now go 2-3 years with barely spending anything and only bringing a Chiesa type signing at the end of a window in 26 and 27. That's not necessarily the case. I mean, in terms of what we're expecting to pay this summer, like I mentioned in the thread, for outgoings in total, including agents' fees, 260 million. However, the agents' fees are only being paid one-off for these deals. So instalments will still be around 149 million, which is in my first graphic in my thread. And we can expect to receive around 90 odd million for instalments for the deals for players we are selling on this summer. So when you net those two amounts off, then we're talking a difference of close to 60 million pounds, which again the club should, barring a catastrophe in terms of performance in 25-26, easily be able to afford from its what we call operating profit. So that is something that means that whilst the club won't be able to go out and spend another £500 million next summer or even some in 2027, the funds should still be there to get perhaps 2, maybe 3 deals done, and that might entail a fairly hefty fee for one player. And really, if we have a strong season, we as a fan base shouldn't be expecting the club to be going out and signing 7, 8, 9, 10 players next summer. If the club needs to do that, then something's gone horribly wrong this season that's coming up. So the funds should be there. It will be a quieter window next summer and in summer 27. But I think that that's only natural. And all top clubs, even your Reals, will sometimes have these kind of transfer windows where they go out and spend quite significant sums, and then the year after that we'll spend relatively little. So whilst these are exciting times in terms of seeing shiny new toys arriving, it will be a quiet one, which we know our friend James Pearce loves to kind of share at the start of every transfer window. Expect it to be a quiet one, and I think whilst he didn't get the opportunity to say that this summer, well, in fact, he might have said it, but if he did, he was spectacularly wrong. Certainly, if he does say that in May 2026, the likelihood is he'll probably be right.
There is a lot of comments coming in. There's almost 1,500 of you watching this right now, so obviously comments come in by coincidence of that number. So I'm trying to put as many of them on the screen as I can, and I'm trying to ask Mo, but some of them do clash with what we're still to speak about, which is why I've held back on putting some of them. And I know so many of you want to know how much more runway Liverpool have with PSR, and we've already kind of touched on FSG there. But the next point really is that how can Liverpool's net outlay of 135 million this summer impact their ability to reinvest infrastructure or in youth development, given FSG's risk-averse approach? Now, that is something that Mo's kind of touched on in that previous answer, and that leads us on to PSR, obviously. And Mo noted that the club has little to be concerned about right now, and what he just described for future summers explains why they're not worried right now, because obviously you can future-proof that across the next couple of years. So I suppose, how confident are you, Mo, in keeping the stable position on that front? You've already mentioned what will have to change with transfers in the next 2 years, obviously, in that respect. And what changes do you think Liverpool and other Premier League clubs will be looking at in terms of the independent financial regulator that we believe is coming in? Is that going to affect the whole landscape of PSR? Could we see a change there that's going to... I mean, I think a lot of the financial regulation was designed to curb the big spenders, the oil clubs. But obviously Liverpool are acting like those clubs this summer for the first time. So is Liverpool going to be dragged into any of this financial regulation as well through the independent regulator? What early signs are there of how that's going to impact the game?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of situation is really interesting at the moment. So what we do know is that PSR is now continuing for another year into 2025-26. So for those of you that are not aware, the Premier League had planned to overhaul its financial regs for 25-26 and implement, amongst other things, something called a squad cost ratio, which aligns the spend that the club has on player wages, coaches' wages, amortization, and one or two other costs relative to turnover and transfer fees, and again, one or two other little sources of revenue. And the kind of ideal marker that the Premier League is going for is 70%. So those costs that I just mentioned should be no more than 70% of those income streams, your main turnover, transfer profits, and two other little bits of income. So say if we do achieve 750 million in 25-26, and the club's profits for player trading amount to say 150 million. I think it will actually be more than that, but just say if it's 150 million, that pegs us at 900 million in terms of income for that ratio assessment. That means 70% of 900 million is 630 million pounds. So the club could go up to 630 million pounds for amortization for new deals, as well as the wage bill for players and coaches. And though my estimation for the wage bill for 25-26 is 430 million, that covers everyone that works at the club, not just players and coaches. The players and coaches will comprise about 75% of that 430 million. So that overall would be what, some 320 something million, there or thereabouts. So if you relate that to amortization, Liverpool would be well under that 70% threshold, which is not the same that can be said for some of the rival clubs like Manchester United or Chelsea, who will have a tougher time dealing with that 70%. But what we don't know yet is when the Premier League definitely does want to implement that rule, and also whether they'll perhaps buffer it, so perhaps start at a higher percentage of say 80% and work its way down. That rule is taking effect though for UEFA competitions, so that's where other clubs may face penalties, fines, for example, and we know that Chelsea, for example, have been levied with a fine, albeit that's not necessarily to do with squad cost ratio failings, but that would be a challenge for them going forwards. But yeah, Liverpool, where PSR is concerned, no concerns at all for the current point in time. And then when we look at 25-26, due to the massive profits, the accounting profits that will be made for disposal of players, with losing the likes of Harvey Elliott, Jarell Quansah, and several others, then the club will be in a very, very healthy place, as PSR is likely to be wound up in its current form. So the club, if you don't want to take my word for it, just look at the way in which the club is doing business. They're very financially astute, conservative as well, and risk averse. And if they had any concern, they wouldn't be committing to the levels of spend that they are.
Yeah.
They're very, very sensible financially. There's nobody that can accuse them of not being as such. And if this was an issue, a concern for them, then the levels of spend we'd be seeing would be considerably less.
Yeah, well answered. And it takes me straight on. That's a lovely segue, actually, to the next point, which is about Michael Edwards. Now, I noticed in your thread that you had said that you thought Michael's time away at the club had helped shape his bolder, more aggressive approach to transfer business. With that, that's just not about money, is it? There's more. I mean, this is a money show, and we're talking about that the fact that Liverpool are spending significantly more money than they have in the past with Michael Edwards involved. But so far, we've not seen the multi-club model come in that we think Michael Edwards had been brought in to do. We've not seen that. We've heard murmurings and whispers, but nothing's come to fruition in that respect. But we are seeing this Michael Edwards approach. I mean, our understanding is that he's now almost sort of gone into that Mike Gordon role where he's controlling the purse strings that Richard Hughes and Julian Ward and the other guys are then having to, or sorry, it wouldn't be Julian Ward because he's FSG as well. So Michael Edwards and Julian Ward are then controlling the purse strings, which open the transfer funds for Richard Hughes and David Woodfine. That's a structure as we understand it right now for the sporting directors. What do you think then is the difference between Michael Edwards before and Michael Edwards now in the fact that you're saying you're seeing this change, the change in him? And I suppose that the lead on part of that question, a complementary part of that question would be the difference between the manager that he's working with, between Jurgen Klopp, who I think it was fair to say is very loyal to the players that he had, and to Arne Slot, who they're not really his players, I suppose. At the heart of it, Jurgen Klopp signed most of these players with Michael Edwards or with Jörg Schmack latterly. What do you see as the differences in the dynamics there?
Yeah, I think that the first thing to say is that under Edwards, the club's recruitment hit rate was incredible for a couple of year period, 2016 to 18. Some really inspired business, a true kind of delivery of that Moneyball ethos that FSG became famous for, and really punching above the weight were Liverpool compared to rivals, where the kind of deals that were being put in place, your signings like Andy Robertson, most notably, Mo Salah, Sadio Mane, and you compare those to what the business that was being done by your Chelseas and Man Uniteds was good. But we got to a point by around 2019 where it did appear that they almost became a victim of their own success. The hit rate was so exceptional, they almost feared that kind of regressing. And some of that does come out in Dr. Ian Graham's kind of book and some of his media interviews. And I think that is perhaps what caused this tension that developed between the analytics people and management, which then saw Edwards move on. We then saw several others move on. There was tensions that developed and manifested, and there were differences of opinion. I think, to be fair to the likes of Jurgen Klopp, I think there was a frustration that, look, I need players, but then, the data guys just seem to be procrastinating, seem to be over analysing, and when we're pitching players to them, they're coming out with reasons why they can't run, reasons why let's go and get it done. And I think that's why we saw those transfer windows that were frustrating to nearly all fans. And as a result of that, I think that the club did leave trophies on the table. There were trophies that were there for the taking. That had we just done those little bits of business, would have got us over the line. If you think back to the Champions League final in 2022, we were clearly the better team. That little bit of extra quality on the pitch, which may have been signed in summer 21, would have then perhaps won us that title instead of us finishing as runners up in that competition. Same with the Premier League that same season. So it's things like that which I think Edwards, he went away from the club, reflected on perhaps what was fundamentally at fault, not only with his approach and that of his colleagues within the data side and the analytics side, but also more broadly within the club. And we again as fans looked at he and Hughes when they returned back either for FSG or the club itself last year, assessed what happened in the transfer window with only one incoming, thought, what on earth are they playing at? What's going on? But I think what we're now seeing is validation of what the media was telling us, which is they're all taking stock, they're all looking to put things in place, put the structures in, so that come summer 25, that's when you'll see what exactly they're up to. And boy, are we seeing what they're up to. So I think there's a lot that he learned. And I think it's an exciting thing for Liverpool Football Club, as well as potentially other clubs that may join this group, because we do know that part of his remit is to develop a multi-club model. Obviously, no clubs have become part of that just yet, but I'm sure in the next 12 months we'll likely hear something. And again, I think that'll be part of that evolution of that overall model, which perhaps we'll come on to a bit later.
Now we need to put the super chat back up from YNWA Foodie there. Again, 199. Thank you for the super chat, YNW Foodie. They really appreciate it. They do. I can't stress enough how helpful those super chats are. The banner there at the bottom shows everyone how much we appreciate those, because they really do help us here at Anfield Index with the content. And it's a great show, Mo and Eddie. I think Mo has to take the lion's share of the credit here. I'm just reading the things that he wanted me to ask him. So it's very much a Mo show, this one, and that's why we always have rotating hosts on Money Talks, because all the hard work, all the preparation, it's all Mo Chatra people. None of the rest of us that host these shows can really take any credit for Money Talks, because it's his expertise and it's his hard work. So we have to thank Mo for that more than anyone else. We move on then from Michael Edwards, and the next thing that we need to ask is about FSG in general. We'll go back to the FSG slide that we had there. Now, from doing these shows, Mo, over the years, that I suppose I expected we would probably hear more about Man City than we would about Liverpool spending this sort of money. All the things we used to talk about years ago, it was always, when will the Man City verdict? And we still don't have an answer to that. And then Liverpool have gone and spent all this money this window. I mean, if you were to ask me what would have come first, I would have definitely thought it would be Man City rather than Liverpool breaking transfer records. But I digress somewhat from the main point of that, which is about FSG. Now, historically through this show, you, me, a few of us on Anfield Index that ask these questions have been quite critical of FSG and the way they run football clubs, because we've always thought, whilst it's good to be sustainable, whilst it's good to plan accordingly and to keep the club above board, shall we say, it is also an entertainment. Sport is entertainment, and it's one of those things that you would think that every now and then they get the entertainment juices going for the fans, but it's never something that's really happened until this summer. So does what's happened this year, does it change your opinion on FSG in any way? Because I know that this Twitter thread that you've done has obviously been very well received. A lot of positivity because everything's good. Liverpool are spending money. But equally, over the time that we've done this show, over the time that you've been on Twitter, over the sort of past 10 years, you've had to face a lot of criticism about the things that you said about FSG and the things that have, in some people's minds, been derogatory to the way that they treat Liverpool Football Club and the way that they kind of manage the asset as a custodian. So where are you with that now? And has anything that's happened this summer changed your opinion of FSG, of FSG, I should say?
Well, I think that my opinion on FSG has changed, but that's because their approach has changed, and that was the thing that I was really keen for them to display. In the past, have I asked for FSG to move on? Absolutely, I have, but that was purely down to what I perceived as a lack of ambition by them. And again, don't take my word for it. They came out on, was it 2 occasions, maybe 3, to actually apologise to fans for their failures when it came to transfer dealings. They've made mistakes. I think they'll be the first to admit it. And in more recent years, as we became powerhouse again under Jurgen Klopp, we won the Champions League, we won the Premier League, we won other trophies. I wanted this to become part of something that was sustained, whereas my view was that FSG, from their American sports background, saw success as something that is traded between clubs, because the way in which baseball and American football and other sports are set up there with the draft system and things like that, it's all about almost giving everyone a turn to be successful. That is not how association football operates in Europe, and especially not in England. And I was frustrated that when the iron was hot, when Jurgen Klopp was seen as this charismatic leader of a club that was playing exciting football with a rabid, excited, passionate fan base, that was a time to really support that and getting some fantastic signings. And yet, we went into summer 2019 where the marquee signing was Adrian. We went into summer 2020 where we did some good business, but in my view, not quite enough. I felt we should have had at least another centre back, and lo and behold, within 3 or 4 months, all of our first team centre backs are out injured. And you can look at other windows as well. So I think that the criticism has been levelled at FSG, but I've also at the same time praised them. So let's not ignore that. I've praised them just last summer for bringing in Edwards, and then in turn supporting Edwards and Co. in recruiting Arne Slot. Now that is something that other owners would have perhaps shied away from, thinking, well, who is Arne Slot? Let's get a name to succeed. This talismanic manager in Jurgen Klopp. That they instead showed faith in Edwards and Co. and said, okay, if you think Slot's the man, we'll back you, and they did, to their credit. Stayed in redevelopment of training facilities, and growth in commercial. All of these things are not to be sniffed at. This is under their watch. We've got to have it both ways. So in my view, there's absolutely been criticism of them, but that's more to do with a lack of balls, if you want to put it that way, when it came to transfer activities. I look at Liverpool Football Club as a major powerhouse, and yet I felt that the way in which we would go about our business was more akin to a mid-table Premier League club, not that's one of the biggest in world football. And yet, for the first time in years, it feels like they've actually taken the bull by the horns and are doing what not only I but many fans were asking for. So they're actually responding to that now, and they're getting things done. And this kind of bold, brave, cutthroat approach is exactly what we were clamoring for last summer before that, and in previous years. So if anything, they're adapting in the way that we've asked for a long time, me included, and they're responding to that criticism in the right way. But it has to be fair and objective. Praise them when they do things well, but issue criticism or call them out when they mess up, and they do mess up. All owners do. No owner is perfect, but at the moment, they're making a lot of right things, making a lot of the right decisions, and the way in which they're handling things are, certainly the envy of many clubs where ownership is in a much worse state. So to be fair to them, they're doing really well. But to say that I was anti FSG, yes, at times I absolutely have been, but that was purely down to objectively looking at what they were doing and their track record. And when they do things well, praise them. When they don't, call it out.
Fair enough. And this is kind of the end of our agenda, but I do want to pull up some of the comments that people have been asking, because we didn't obviously get time to address them all as we went, and there's hundreds of comments, so I'm not going to do them all, but there's a couple that I think we'll pull Mo in on just to kind of get his take on them. These are questions. Now, Adam's asked a question here, which I think is tongue-in-cheek, because Adam will know the answer to this, but it is one that some fans throw at Liverpool. So what's your take on this? So this is Adam as a Yankees fan, which is obviously baseball. How long are the Red Sox going to be broke because of these deals? So Adam's putting his Yankees hat on and wondering how long his rivals are going to be broke for because of these Liverpool deals. And what's your take on that, Mo? Because I think there's a bit of separation here, isn't there?
Well, I found it funny a few weeks ago when the club announced the Wirtz deal, and then rather randomly, all of these Red Sox fans were kicking off because I think that the Red Sox just traded out their star player or something like that. So they were putting two and two together and thinking, okay, well, FSG are diverting money from our beloved Red Sox to facilitate deals for this football club or soccer club in England. No. That's absolutely not what's going on. The FSG do certainly keep these two things separate, which is not the same, by the way, as Kroenkes when it comes to Arsenal. Arsenal have benefited from investment from the Kroenkes, which they've diverted from funds raised by the Kroenkes NFL franchise. But I'll just leave it at that. So no, don't worry, Adam. I think that any kind of association with Liverpool is absolutely wide of the mark, as James Pearce would say.
And then we've got another one here that says, Mo, be honest, do you see Isaac happening financially? I think financially, you've said in your thread, yes. I mean, there's no reason for it not to happen financially. In terms of the football side of it, that's a completely different opinion, and I don't think that I mean, you can have your say on that if you want, Mo, but I don't think that's really what. You've not been saying you definitely think that deal will happen or anything like that. You're just saying that Liverpool have the finances to make it happen if they so wish. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I normally don't speculate about these types of things about whether deals will or won't happen. I'd love to see Isaac come in, but yeah, my point is financially, it absolutely is doable. Whether the club will do it, make it happen, is another matter entirely. It's a bit like in previous seasons where I'd come out and say, well, the funds are there for the club to spend significantly, the club wouldn't, and then fans would get upset thinking, well, okay, well, the club hasn't spent, so therefore the money probably wasn't there. No, that's not the case. You know, there's a lot of things that can happen which mean that deals don't get over the line. Same with this Isak one. If it doesn't happen, it won't be because the funds are not available.
Yep, fair enough. And there's another question here from Hyla Matthias, which is I've tracked every transfer window to find a transfer window that's even close to this. In my opinion, 1986 is the only summer transfer window that can be compared to this. Do you agree? So that would have been the summer that I guess 86, 87. So that's the one where Ian Rush would have left for Juventus, which I think Liverpool brought in a £3.2 million record transfer fee. So this has taken us back to our youth, Mo, very much so in our sort of formative years of supporting Liverpool. And of course, in return for that sale, Liverpool brought in John Aldridge before the end of the previous season. There was no transfer windows as such then. You could buy players at any time, I think. And then there was Peter Beardsley and John Barnes, obviously, also came in. And I've actually written a piece on this this team that's going to go on our Substack in the next day or so. It's a Poetry in Motion team, the 87-88, which goes on to sort of dominate football under Kenny. But in terms of transfer windows and finances, I don't know how easy they are to compare, Mo, because obviously Liverpool kind of got a windfall and then went and spent it. That seemed to be the way. And I don't think installments and amortization were things in those days. So I don't know if it's easy enough to compare that window to this one.
No, I mean, if we're talking about the caliber of players, then that's one thing. But in terms of the financial dynamics, it's a completely different world now to what it was back then. I mean, then, the deal. I mean, I think John Barnes was maybe not even £1 million, or
Yeah, he was
just around that
eight
figure.
fifty, I think. 850. Beardsley was, I think, 1.9. He was more than double, and I think Aldridge was about
Yeah.
700,000 or something as well. So I mean,
Mm,
it's a completely
yeah.
different era. But I would have imagined in those days, and I might be wrong, but I would imagine in those days, Juventus would have paid Liverpool pretty much all of the 3.2 million in a oneer, and Liverpool would have given the money to Oxford, Watford, and Newcastle in a oneer at that sort of time as well. I don't know if that's a fact. I've never even thought about it before, but I would think there'll be less installments, and certainly amortization wasn't a thing because there was no PSR or FFP or anything like that in those days.
I mean, there would still have been the need to publish accounts, and so amortization should technically have still been a thing. However, the kind of numbers we're talking about would have been much smaller from an accounting perspective. And in terms of financial regulations deployed by what was then the Football League, again, there was kind of very little there, just because the money within the game was significantly less. So there really wasn't the need to put in place all these rules, because you didn't have, multimillionaires and billionaires looking to buy their way to league titles. Even though, interestingly, on Twitter today, I read a comment from I think it was a Newcastle United or Chelsea fan, who claimed that under the Morse family, who he claimed was the richest family in Europe, which is quite an interesting take. We were buying our way to success for 15 years, hence all of our league titles and European Cups. So that's quite an interesting one. Not quite sure about its factual accuracy, but
Right, two more to finish up. So this is a question I need to ask. It's from Shanti. He says, why does Isaac signing for a Saudi club cannot help Newcastle with their PSR, and why Premier League clubs can report Newcastle if they receive huge amounts above the valuation from the Saudis? Well, this is all stemming back, I think, Mo, to PSR and the rules, and there was probably something put in place once the Saudis acquired Newcastle to stop them doing anything too untoward. But in an era where clubs are selling their own women's teams and hotels next to the grounds and stuff, who knows? But what's your take on this? I think sort of the foundation of this is, if Isak wants a new contract that Newcastle can't offer under PSR terms, is there scope for the Saudi ownership of Newcastle to sell him to a club under the PIF in Saudi and then potentially loan him back on the new contract, with Newcastle not having to pay as much of that money? I mean, it does seem pie in the sky, but in this day of sort of financial weirdness, who knows is my answer. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, I believe that there are some rules, albeit I think there might be UEFA rules rather than Premier League rules that should prohibit that. Because otherwise, if there were no rules to deal with that, then Manchester City would be spending their entire time just trading between their 11 or 12 clubs. And whilst they do that to some extent, it's nowhere near as much as they otherwise would if it was a complete free for all. And we do know that there are other kind of multi-club models that are now developing in the game as well. So in short, I think that there are rules to protect from that. How tight the rules will be held up and what punishments may be levied, we don't really know at this stage. What we do know is that for various reasons, UEFA and the Premier League, when it comes to administering their rules, are not the strongest, shall we say. So yeah, you wouldn't be surprised if the Saudi investment fund does try to facilitate a deal like that and see if they can get away with it. Stranger things have happened.
Two more comments into show before we finish up. So this one is about something that Mo's been promising for a while. Did Mo ever? It's from Derek. Did Mo ever do the show on Liverpool's next redevelopment of the stadium? I know the answer's no, but I'll let Mo kind of give you more on that.
Yeah, the answer is no. I have been trying to get a guest on to speak about that subject, and it's just a case of not quite getting the diaries to work out, albeit I've been trying for several months now, but I'm still hopeful of getting that done. If not, then I might just have to fall upon another guest to discuss the subject. But it is something worth discussing, even though, again, FSG have claimed that their kind of work around expanding Anfield is pretty much done. There are things that have been going on in the last year or two that suggest otherwise. So that's something that I will like to definitely talk about and discuss in. Though Anfield is great and looks magnificent at 61,000, we all know that the demand still significantly exceeds supply, and the ground is still nowhere near big enough to accommodate all the many fans that would love to attend each match day. So that's something that the club will have to make a decision on at some point. But it doesn't appear that that's something that's at the forefront of their thoughts just at this moment in time.
Thanks for that. So we're going to end with a super chat, and it's YNWA Foodie again. And this time he's doubled his funds. He's gone to $4.99 for an extra one. So thank you so much for that. And what YNWA Foodie's commented is these kind of shows are the reason why I'm an AI Pro subscriber. In my opinion, money well spent. Also the great chats in Discord. So just to elaborate on what he said there, obviously, as well as these video podcasts on YouTube, which we do for free, there's also an AI Pro subscription, which is effectively the hundreds of audio podcasts that we offer as well as the audio from these video podcasts, all available on your favorite podcast device without adverts. So if you're interested in that, it's AnfieldIndexPro.com. It's not a high fee. It's about the price of a cup of coffee every month, and you can get all of our shows, hundreds and hundreds of hours of content without adverts, completely uninterrupted, uncut, just as they're produced by the podcasters, of which Mo and I are two of those. And he also mentions the Discord community. Now, that is something free to join, AnfieldIndex.com/Discord, which is DISCORD. We encourage all Liverpool fans to join that community. It's absolutely excellent. I mean, there's so much information and opinion shared between Liverpool fans without all the toxicity that you get on the social media platforms that you may be used to. You can speak openly in a fairly safe place for Liverpool fans. on Discord. So AnfieldIndex.com/Discord, and there is a VIP section of Discord as well for Anfield Index Pro subscribers, where we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what we may be hearing off the record from journalists and from insiders, agents, and such on the transfers. So it's been a very, very active place this past week or so, especially with all the Alexander Isak stuff that's been going on. So do head over to Discord and do dabble in it. And if you want to go for Anfield Index Pro and try it, then go for it. You know what I mean? You're not looking at a big investment for something to try, and there's no long-term commitment. You can cancel and just listen to it for a month and say it's not for me. So AnfieldIndex.com/Discord or AnfieldIndexPro.com to sign up to that. So all that remains for me to do is thank Mo. We've not done this for a while, Mo, but I don't think we'll wait as long until we do it the next time. We'll as long as there's stuff to talk about, then we'll keep coming back and doing it. So thank you for joining me today.
No, thanks to be on, and hopefully be back very soon. Maybe just get a little bite-sized version of Money Talks out next week, and as we get closer to the start of the season and closer to the end of the transfer window, I'm sure there'll be more little subjects coming up that will certainly take interest for fans when it comes to the finances. So if there are, then I'll be there.
Perfect. Thanks, Mo, and until next time, everyone. Up the Reds.